one of the common things that they say is that people need to lower their expectations, that they've been giving these ridiculously high expectations from Hollywood or from pop culture, or from filter apps or whatever it is. Right? You learn it young from Disney, right? It's the prince that's going to show up, or it's the princess you're going to find. And then it's Instagram and hookup culture with everything that we have on social media. And then as you're older and lonely and trying to make sense of your life, it's Hallmark movies, right? And all of them are crap. Can I just say that right now? All of them are crap. But a lot of people, I think, have learned the wrong lesson, because what they do is they look at all that and say, oh, yeah, well, they've created these ridiculously high expectations. And if you really want to find someone that you can have a good marriage with, you need to lower your expectations. Garbage. Absolute garbage.
Now, what kind of expectations are you thinking of, Nick?
I don't think that the expectations that you see in Disney, and certainly not on social media or like the hookup culture, and not even a Hallmark, I don't think any of them are high expectations. I think they're stupid expectations.
But just to clarify, if Christian and I are looking for a 10, that would be an expectation that should be lowered.
No.
What's your version of a 10?
Yeah, exactly.
This is not the case. I'm making this clear.
Oh, okay.
It's not the case.
Caveat
let's just say, for instance, Christian and I wanted a 10 out of 10, and that was all we were going to go for. Physical attractiveness.
So here's what
I just wanted to clarify that.
Here's the problem that I have with this whole concept of what expectations are supposed to be, is that my point is that like Disney, social media, Hallmark, they're not creating high expectations, they're creating stupid ones.
Okay.
Right? I'm sorry, but my wife, 10 out of 10 for me.
Sure.
Absolute 10 out of 10. And that's all I was willing to settle for. And I don't apologize for that. And look, I feel very blessed. I found it at 19.
Yeah.
Okay, but the thing that I like to tell people is it's not about lowering your expectations. It's about figuring out what should your expectations be in order to get the most out of like your marriage that you can possibly expect. And again, I come from a Christian worldview, and so I place a very, very high premium. Like, this is the most important relationship you will have outside of your relationship with God. Right? So, of course, you should go into it with high expectations.
I disagree with you, but maybe it's because we're using different terms for expectations.
It depends on your metrics, really. You've got to kind of define your terms.
I don't think you and I are defining expectations the exact same way,
And
because
that
I was
is the-
defining expectations the way that Hamilton was defining it.
And that's the first thing that needs to be fixed, because a lot of the way that we define these things has been taught to us, again, by social institutions that are setting expectations not too high. They're setting the wrong sort of expectations.
Okay. Well, I mean, most social media is so polished now. You've got women who can't put a picture up without putting a filter on their face first and cinching in their waist and, expanding their bosom or whatever. And I mean, sometimes they do it surgically. Sometimes they just do it with the photo app. And here's the problem is, even that woman who is the picture of the physical 10 isn't a 10 in real life if you're using that picture as your base, because she's polishing herself up. She's putting a filter on her face. She's, narrowing out her nose and making her eyes look bigger and fixing all the little imperfections on her skin. I mean, the problem is I do think that people's mental image of what beauty is has really been morphed, and now people are all starting to look similar.
Well, Tina, you've just been brainwashed by the heteronormative,
Candace Owens just got into big snafu with women because she said she wanted to know if men really think that lip fillers and all of these things, nipping and tucking and all of this actually looks attractive. Here's the problem, is that if the people do it well, you won't even know they did it. Right. And so there is, what we find unattractive is the overuse of that. But there's a lot of women walking around where you would have no idea they actually had any of that done.
But you see where we've started this entire conversation, right? This entire conversation has started off with physical appearance.
Right.
Because physical appearance is important. I'm not going to say it's not a factor.
It's the first thing that attracts you to a person.
It's the first thing that you see, and it's the first thing that you use to essentially, we can't use the word discriminate anymore because it sounds bad, but I mean that in the intellectual sense, where you differentiate between something that you prefer versus something that you don't prefer. But it's obviously one of the first things that you see. And attraction matters, right? It absolutely matters. The idea that physical attraction doesn't matter at all, or like a really truly good person doesn't really even care about that stuff. Okay, let's not live in la la land. People do care about physical attraction to another person. However, when we talk about what should your expectations be for marriage, the first question I have for something is, I don't know, what do you expect to get out of your marriage? Like, what's your marriage actually built upon? Because again, if it's built upon Disney, then you have this false notion of what marriage actually looks like. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, Disney never goes into marriage.
Right.
Disney goes into weddings.
Yep.
Right? Disney goes into a big thing, and then there's a big wedding, and then people ride off into
And the
sunset.
wedding saves her from everything.
Right? And then Instagram and hookup culture and all that is all focused on the physical attraction and using another person to essentially satiate your lust. Right? And then what's Hallmark? Right? Because theoretically, Hallmark is the most defined storyline out of all of this. Hallmark also doesn't go into marriage. It just goes into the romance, the dating, and the wedding. But the other thing that I think is interesting and completely ridiculous about that is that, look, every Hallmark, let me just go in and give you every Hallmark movie. Like, she had a high-paying, high-demand job in the city, and then she went home for Christmas, and she fell in love with the nice, romantic, curiously good-looking single-father baker.
Artisan baker.
And then she gave up her high-powered career because she fell in love. And now she wakes up at 4:30 in the morning, 6 days out of the week to bake bread. I don't think so. Right? That's not a reasonable expectation either. Like, she had certain goals, interests for her life, and now it's like real love is when you give up all of that for the really good-looking single dad baker.
One comment and a question. My first comment is, if people were as interested in storylines about marriage as they were about engagements and weddings, they would make movies about marriage.
Well, no, so here's what I will tell
And
you.
that's very telling.
And once upon
It
upon a time, we had a lot more shows and sitcoms that really elevated the whole concept of marriage. Now, people look at it now and say, "Oh, that was, they're horrible patriarchal, society," and that was
Like Disney alone, if you watch any of their kid movies or shows, the mom and dad, like the dad is always a total doofus and
he's an idiot.
And he's a big lunk and always thinks the wrong way, and the mom's always got to correct it. And the mom's always got these secrets with her and her kids, and like they have the connection, but then dad's this douchebag off somewhere.
He's a loser
whatever.
usually.
And and he's usually like the comic relief because he's a moron. That is what is being framed up in these people's mind of, oh, well, when you get married, you have, like 3 kids instead of 2 because your husband's always going to be a child.
Yeah.
And it really has done a disservice to real men. And some of it is because of the feminization of men, that there are a lot of men like that, where they are betas. And, or we affectionately call them soy boys, where it's like... And I have a theory about that with the whole birth control thing and what people are attracted to while they're on birth control. But anyway, the point being that I think that this has skewed what people think a marriage would be. And you've got this massive wedding industry where it's like, you're going to be a princess for a day. You're the queen for the day. And you've created these bridezillas, and they need everything to be visually perfect. They put more money, more effort, and more work into the day of the wedding than they do in the rest of the marriage. And they get home.
That was a profound statement right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, it's true. You've got like the average wedding is like 30 grand now.
that's nuts.
And it used to be that people save that money for a down payment on a home, or they're like saving it for their future. One day they're going to blow that amount of money. And chances are they're not going to do the work to maintain that marriage on the other end of it. Maybe they haven't even had the correct conversations or seen the red flags or anything like that beforehand, because they were so blinded by the idea of love and the idea of getting married.
Well, but that's my point, is once we get into this, defining your terms is important, because when we talk about the idea of love or the idea of romance or the idea of a wedding or the idea of marriage, ideas from who, right? Who gave us the ideas that we have about these things? Because if your ideas about these things came from Hollywood, I've got horrible news. Right? They're never going to live up to what your expectations are, not because your standards are too high. It's because the standards that you were given, the expectations you were fed, are incorrect. They are wrong. And in fact, they're robbing you of something so much better. That's the reason why I hate it when we tell young men and women, lower your standards, lower your expectations. No. Your expectations and your standards should be through the roof on the things that truly matter to make a good marriage.
So what matters?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent question,
Hold
Christian.
on.
So glad you asked.
Before